The sky above Seoul tore open with silent, cruel light. It was not lightning. It was something colder, a surgical beam of energy from the black shapes now blotting out the stars. The Krell Armada did not roar. It descended with a quiet, terrible finality. Satellite feeds dissolved into static. Phones went dark. The digital heartbeat of the world skipped, then FLATLINED dot in a mountainside bunker near the old city. Lieutenant Ji-hoon felt the deep thump of distant impacts through the rock. The command center was a tomb of dead screens and shouting men. He saw the general's face on the last functioning monitor, a tiny, pixelated image of despair. All major command nodes are gone, the general said, his voice cracking. You are on your own. Disperse, survive, fight as you can. The screen went black. The shouting stopped. The only sounds were the hum of emergency generators and the ragged breath of soldiers. They were alone. The map on the wall showed a planet drowning in red markers. They were outnumbered 100 to 1, 1,000 to 1. The numbers had no meaning anymore. Aside Ji-hoon, Sergeant Soo-min wiped dust from her face. She was not looking at the dead map. She was hunched over a single piece of equipment, an old ham radio unit she had insisted on bringing. Its green glow was the only living light in the room. Everyone is screaming, she said softly, adjusting the dial. Panic, calls for help. It's just noise. Ji-hoon nodded, his mind a blank sheet of ice. What was the plan? Guerrilla warfare against orbital warships. His training had no answer. He ordered his remaining squad to prepare to move out. They would find survivors, find a place to hide. It was a small, hopeless thought. Wait, Soo-min said. Her voice was a sharp knife in the dark. She held a headphone to one ear. This is different. It's not a scream. Through the hiss and crackle of a dying world, a calm, steady voice emerged. It was an older man's voice, weary but precise. This is Dr. Yoon, Bizen National University Astrophysics Department. Can anyone hear me? I have analyzed their shield emissions from the initial bombardment. There is a pattern. They are not perfect. They have a resonant frequency dip every 47.3 seconds. I am repeating a data packet on this frequency. If you can hear this, if you have any transmitting capability, aim for 12.8 gigahertz at the dip. It may destabilize local shielding. Acknowledge if you receive. The message repeated. Ji-hoon stared at Soo-min. An astrophysics professor? In a university under attack? It was madness. A data packet? This was a war of beams and bombs. But Soo-min was already moving. She grabbed a data cable, her fingers flying. The portable field unit, she said to Ji-hoon. It has a tactical transmitter. It can't reach orbit, but it could reach something low. A dropship. That is not a weapon, Ji-hoon said. It is information. Soo-min shot back, her eyes fierce in the radio's glow. He is giving us a key. A very small, specific key. Far to the south, in a basement in Daegu, filled with the smell of soldering iron and instant noodles. A young woman named Minji heard the same transmission. Her apartment was gone, her family missing. Her world had shrunk to this basement and her computer, which was miraculously still running on a battery bank. She was a graduate student in signal processing. When Dr. Yoon's data packet came through, her computer chimed. She opened the file, her eyes scanning the complex waveforms and mathematical notations. It matched her own frantic recordings of the energy spikes. The doctor was right. More than right. His math was elegant. In Gwangju, an old man named Dae Hyeon listened in his small workshop. He was a retired radar technician for the airport. His hands, gnarled with age, touched the dials of his custom radio rig, a hobby his wife had always called a clutter. He understood the language of frequencies and pulses. Dr. Yoon's words were not a plea. They were an instruction manual. Guyan looked at his old, high-powered directional antenna on the roof. It was meant to talk to planes. Perhaps it could talk to something else. The message did not stay in Korea. It bounced, echo by desperate echo, through a planet-wide web of forgotten technology. An amateur radio enthusiast in Finland heard it and relayed it. A hacker collective in Brazil decoded the packet and translated it. A former satellite engineer in Canada scribbled notes. The Krell commander, from the bridge of his flagship, the Unyielding Will, watched the tactical display. Phase 1 was complete. Human global communications were shattered. Their militaries were isolated, blind insects soon to be crushed. He observed a dropship squadron descending toward a concentration of heat signatures labeled Jakarta Residual Resistance. It would be a clean, overwhelming strike, a demonstration of power to induce global surrender. His many eyes did not see the tiny, specific burst of energy that shot up from a rooftop in a suburban neighborhood, carrying a precise set of numbers on a very specific frequency. The lead dropship shuddered. Its shield integrity indicator, a value that had never moved from 100%, flickered. For 0.8 seconds, it dropped to 4%. A salvaged shoulder-fired missile, launched by a man who had never fired one before, streaked up from the ruins below. It connected. The dropship exploded in a fireball, raining debris on its sisters. The Krell squadron scattered in confusion. On the flagship, an alert pinged. The commander dismissed it. A lucky hit. Statistical noise in an otherwise flawless operation. The humans were behaving predictably, fighting with their crude weapons, until they were exhausted. Back in the bunker, Ji-hoon stared at a new report scrawled on a notepad. A dropship down over Jakarta. Cause unknown. Coincidence. Soo-min looked up from her radio. A new voice was speaking, a young woman's voice, tight with focus. This is Min Ji, relaying from Daegu. I have verified Dr. Yoon's data. The modulation pattern is consistent. I am building a predictive model for the next dip cycle. Stand by for upload. Then another voice, older, gruffer. Daehayan, Gwangju. My transmitter is online. I can broadcast the pulse sequence on your mark. Ji-hoon felt the ice in his mind begin to crack, not with warmth, but with a strange electric current. They were not just screaming into the void. They were talking to each other. They were building something. A weapon made not of metal, but of shared knowledge. He looked at his tactical transmitter, then at the map still glowing with impossible odds. He made a decision. He was not just a soldier hiding anymore. He was a node in a new invisible network. Sergeant, he said, his voice firmer now. Get me everything Min-ji and Dae-hyun are sending. We are not dispersing. We are going to find a high point. We are going to broadcast. He did not know what would happen. But for the first time since the sky tore open, he had a signal to follow. The war of bullets had lasted minutes. The war of ideas, it seemed, had just begun. The Krell commander watched the data stream on his screen. The loss of the dropship over Jakarta was a minor anomaly. His fleet, the Unyielding Will at its heart, was a perfect machine. Below, the human world was in chaos. Their cities burned. Their armies ran in disconnected, hopeless circles. This was the correct order of things. A strong, unified species conquered a weak, divided one. He gave new orders. The pacification would continue. Ground troops would move in to secure key resource points. They would take the planet's minerals, its water, and process its biological matter. It was all very logical. The humans left alive would be studied, then assigned to labor. Their history showed they would eventually submit. They always did. On the ground, Ji-hoon and Soo-min moved through the ruins. They were not running anymore. They were hunting. They found a place on a high hill, overlooking a shattered highway. Their squad was small, just 5 soldiers now. They set up the tactical transmitter. Su Min connected it to a rugged laptop, where data packets from Minji and Dae-Hyan blinked. "The pattern is real," Su Min whispered. She showed Ji-hoon a graph. It was a waveform. The Krell shield frequency was a steady, powerful hum. But every 47.3 seconds, like a heartbeat skipping, it dipped. Minji's model predicts the next dip in 6 minutes. Dae-Hyan has sent a pulse sequence. It is a simple noise burst, but on the exact right frequency. Ji-hoon looked at his soldiers. They looked back, confused. This was not soldiers' work. "What is the target?" one asked. Ji-hoon pointed to the sky. A single Krell drone ship, like a metal insect, glided slowly over the distant city. It was scanning for heat signatures. "That," he said. "We are not trying to destroy it. We are trying to talk to it in a language it does not understand." They aimed the dish antenna. It felt ridiculous. Su Min counted down the seconds. At the exact moment, she triggered the broadcast. A burst of invisible energy shot into the air. It lasted less than a second. Nothing happened. The drone continued its slow, menacing path. Then it stopped. It wobbled. Its smooth flight became jerky. It spun in a slow, clumsy circle. For a full minute, it drifted like a falling leaf before crashing silently into a field of rubble. The soldiers stared. There was no explosion. No missile trail. It just fell. A cheer started in one man's throat, but Ji-hoon silenced it with a look. He felt a chill. It worked. A professor's math, sent through an old man's radio, aimed by a soldier, had knocked a machine from the sky. This was a new kind of fear dot in her basement in Dagu. Minji saw the result differently. Her computer screen showed more than a simple pulse. She had accessed a public Krell data feed. It was not secret. The Krell did not think to hide it. Why would they? It was full of technical information, status reports on their ships and drones. It was all in a complex code, but to Minji, code was just another language. She saw the moment the drone failed. The feed showed an error message. Shield harmonic resonance-induced system cascade. Primary controls locked. She understood. The pulse was not a weapon. It was a wrong note sung into a perfect choir. It made the singer stumble. She began to write a new program. It would not just send one pulse. It would listen to the Krell frequencies, predict the dip, and send a string of corrupted data designed to look like a normal system signal. She called it a snarl. Dae-Hyan, in his workshop, worked on power. The pulse needed to be stronger to reach higher targets. He took apart old microwave ovens, scavenged parts from broken cars. His hands, which had fixed radios for 40 years, built a crude amplifier. It was ugly and dangerous, but it hummed with energy. He connected it to his antenna. He was not a fighter. He was a mechanic. And the enemy's machine had a loose part. The Krell commander received another report. A drone failure. Then another. A small resource collector in a place called Scotland suffered a sudden engine meltdown. The cause was unclear. His technical officer, a slender Krell with fingers that moved over screens like water, seemed troubled. The failures share a pattern, Commander. They are all preceded by a tiny, precise energy spike from the surface. It is not an attack. It is a signal. A signal saying what? The commander asked. We do not know. It does not match any human military code. It is too simple. Then ignore it, the commander said. They are throwing sand at a tank. It is annoyance, not a threat. Increase the pace. Move to population centers. Destroy their nests. They will break. The orders went out. Larger ships, shaped like terrible dark manta rays, moved over human cities. Their undersides glowed with a terrible light. Energy projectors charged. They would level whole blocks to show the cost of resistance. To teach the final lesson. In a subway tunnel, under what was left of Seoul, a young woman named Hana hid with dozens of others. She was a video editor. Her equipment was a small camera, a laptop, and a portable battery. She heard the deep whine of the ship above ground. She felt the rumble. Dust fell from the ceiling. People screamed. Hana did not scream. She climbed the broken escalator to the station entrance. She peeked out. She saw the Krell walkers, giant metal spiders, crushing cars as they moved. She saw the giant ship in the sky, light gathering. She raised her camera. She did not film the destruction. She zoomed in on the walker's joints, on the vents on its underside, on the symbols etched on its armor. She crawled back into the tunnel. Her hands shook, but her mind was clear. She connected her camera to her laptop. She began to speak, her voice quiet but steady. This is Hana. I am near the Samgaki station. The big ships are coming to destroy us. But I am looking at the walkers. They are not perfect. See here, on the underside? Those are heat vents. They get very hot. If you are close, maybe within 50 meters, heat is a weapon they cannot shield. She uploaded the video to a network she did not fully understand. She used a path Minji had shared. It was not the internet. It was the new desperate web of the ham radio signals and data relays. In 100 hiding places. People saw Hannah's video. A cook in a ruined restaurant saw the heat vents and looked at his kitchen. A mechanic saw the joint construction and looked at his tools. The Krell ship fired. A beam of pure white heat cut the sky and touched the earth. 6 city blocks turned into glass and fire in an instant. The sound was beyond sound. It was the end of the world in one place. The commander watched the thermal image bloom on his screen. Good. The lesson was being written in fire. But below, in the tunnel, Hana was not crying. She was recording again. Her face was smudged, her eyes bright with tears she refused to shed. The vents are here, she said again, drawing a circle on the video frame. You need a directional heat source, a modified industrial heater, or the emitter from a microwave. I will show you how to wire it to a battery. She was not a soldier. She was a teacher. And her first lesson was that everything, even the machine meant to kill you, could become a textbook. The Krell commander saw the destruction. He expected the resistance to collapse. He waited for the surrender signals. Instead, his communication officer spoke, voice confused. Commander, we are detecting a surge in low-power, irregular transmissions from the target area. They are not pleas. They are diagrams. The war had changed. The humans were not fighting back with guns. They were fighting back with instructions. And the commander, for the first time, felt a cold trickle of doubt. You could bomb a city into dust. But how do you bomb an idea? The glassed ground where 6 city blocks once stood was still hot. The Krell commander observed it from orbit, a satisfied calm returning. This was the language beings understood. Power, fear, the low-power transmissions. Diagrams had stopped from that zone. Silence was the correct response. On the ground, the silence was different. It was the silence of people who had just seen the absolute worst thing possible and were now thinking very, very hard. Hana's video did not die in the tunnel. Before the beam fell, her data packet had bounced. It found Minji's basement in Daegu. Minji, her eyes red from sleeplessness and coding, watched it. She saw the walker's vents. She cross-referenced it with the public Krell technical feed. She found the maintenance manual for a Mark 7 atmospheric processor used by Krell infantry. The vents were a design flaw. They couldn't be shielded without trapping waste heat and cooking the pilot inside. It was a simple equation. She did not write a eulogy for the dead of Samgaki. She wrote a 3-line software patch. She called it the Sizzle. It was a tiny program that could run on any old smartphone. It would use the phone's camera to identify the vent pattern Hana had shown. It would then tell the user the exact frequency to blast with a microwave emitter to cause a heat feedback loop. She uploaded it to the network. In a small town not far from the devastation, a man named Jay heard the news on a crackling radio. He was not a fighter. He was a quiet man who worked with plants. He ran a small lab that engineered crops to grow in tough soil. His world was genes and proteins and quiet growth. The news of the city's death did not make him angry. It made him cold and precise. He looked at his lab. He looked at his samples of a fast-growing, iron-rich vine he'd been developing. It was a weed, really. A tenacious, stubborn thing. He looked at the description of the Krell foot soldiers. Their armor was sealed, but their atmospheric processors had intake filters. They needed to breathe processed air. Jay began a new experiment. He spliced genes. He made the vine grow faster, much faster. He gave it a trigger, a chemical signal found in Krell exhaust, and he made its spores a fine, sticky powder. Meanwhile, the Krell ground troops moved in. They marched in perfect formations through the rubble, their heavy boots crushing everything. They met little military resistance. What they met was something else. A patrol entered a neighborhood of shattered houses. They scanned for weapons, for heartbeats. Their sensors showed nothing but small, scattered energy signatures, old batteries, dying electronics. From a broken window, a retired restaurant cook named Mr. Park watched them. He held not a gun, but a heavy, modified kitchen tool. It was an industrial-strength meat-searing torch hooked to a car battery. On his lap was an old phone, running Minji's Sizzle app. He aimed the phone's camera. A green box appeared around the vent on the back of the nearest walker. The app displayed a number, 2.4 GHz. Mr. Park aimed his homemade emitter and pressed the trigger. There was no beam, no explosion. The walker took 3 more steps. Then it stopped. Smoke began to seep from its joints. It shuddered. A hatch burst open and a Krell soldier tumbled out, its atmosphere suit smoking. It did not get up. The other walkers turned, confused, scanning for an attack. They found nothing but rubble and silence. The report reached the commander. Walker disabled. Cause appears to be internal overheating. No projectile impact. A malfunction, the commander said, dismissing it. Continue the sweep. But the malfunctions multiplied. In a different city, a Krell patrol was lured into a narrow street by the sound of a crying child, a recording played from a speaker. Once they were fully inside, a teenager on a rooftop emptied a bucket of a thick, sticky liquid onto them. It was a mixture of homemade napalm and a special polymer. It stuck to their armor and burned with intense heat. It was not enough to break the armor, but it forced the soldiers to shut their visual ports, to retreat, blinded and confused. The war was becoming strange. It was a war of traps and tricks, of biology and bad ideas. J, the plant biologist, was ready. He knew the Krell had set up a forward processing base in a city park, using the flat ground for their landing craft. Under cover of darkness, he crept to the edge of the park. He wore no uniform. He carried a small garden sprayer, the kind used for roses. It was filled with his engineered spores. He sprayed them into the air vents of the parked Krell skiffs. He scattered more like seeds around the perimeter. Nothing happened for a full day. The Krell at the base went about their work, stripping the land. Then, a soldier noticed a green speck on his boot. He wiped it off. The next morning, the speck was a tiny, wiry vine. It grew while he watched. He tried to cut it, but it grew back faster. It grew over his boot, up his leg. He called for help. It was too late. The spores were everywhere, in the soil, in the air systems. The trigger chemical present in all Krell machinery had awakened them. The park began to turn green, but it was a hungry, aggressive green. Vines snaked over equipment, plugging exhaust ports, forcing their way into seams. They grew into the atmospheric intakes, a living, thickening filter. Inside the main habitat dome, soldiers began to cough. Their air processors whined, choked with fast-growing plant matter. They tried to burn it, but it was wet and full of sap. They tried to cut it, but for every vine cut, 3 more grew. Within 48 hours, the base was a silent green tomb. The Krell inside had suffocated, not by poison, but by life itself. A relentless engineered life that wanted only to grow. When the commander received this report, his calm shattered. A plant? He roared. They stopped a base with a weed? His science officer trembled. It is a targeted biological agent, Commander, engineered to respond to our presence. It is ingenious, and it is not in our threat database. Our systems have no response for gardening. The commander stared at the image from the base. Lush green vines held nettle wreckage in a gentle, deadly embrace. This was not war. This was perversion. They were not fighting soldiers. They were fighting cooks and farmers and students. He issued a furious order. Find the source. Find the minds behind this chaos. Trace the signals. Find where their knowledge comes from and burn it out. His technicians worked. They finally pinpointed a major, constant stream of data. It was complex, full of codes and schematics. It was coming from a coastal city called Bizen, from a location tagged as a university. The signal was strong, a beacon of human intelligence. The commander felt a grim satisfaction. Finally, a real target. A center of command. He would cut the head off this strange, ugly beast. He assembled a strike force. They would drop directly on the location, capture the human leaders, and make them watch as he erased their precious knowledge from the earth. He did not understand. The people in Bizen were not commanders. They were librarians, and they had been waiting for him to find them. Dr. Yoon's hands did not shake as he typed. The basement of the Bizen National University Library was cold and smelled of old paper and dust. Around him, a dozen others worked in quiet concentration. Minji was there, having fled her basement in Daegu to bring her computers here. Dae-hyun was there, his old fingers splicing cables to boost their signal. There were others. A network engineer named Soo-jin, a young physics student named Tae-young, a former video game programmer named Ben. They were not an army. They were a study group, the most important study group in human history. Their single, powerful transmitter sent a constant stream into the world. It was not one signal, but a river of them. Schematics for pulse generators. Updates to the Sizzle app. Jay's botanical formulas for the choking vine. Hana's video tutorials on weak points. They were the central server for the planet's new, desperate internet. They knew they were a target. They had seen the Krell tactic. Find the head and crush it. Soo-jin had set up 100 fake signals, bouncing their data through broken satellites and old relays. But Dr. Yoon knew it was only a matter of time. The Krell would trace the source. It was logical. They will come here, he said one night, his voice calm. The others stopped their work and looked at him. They will come with great force. They will want to capture us, to understand, and then to destroy. Minji hugged herself. Then we should scatter. Go dark. No, Dr. Yoon said, shaking his head. He took off his glasses and cleaned them slowly. We have one final lesson to teach. The most important one. We have to show them that the head is not the important part. He explained his idea. It was not a plan for survival. It was a plan for a legacy. They would build a final data packet. But this packet would be a trap. It would look like their most valuable information, the core codes, the master keys to understanding Krell technology. But inside, it would carry a poison, a logic bomb. A piece of software so clever and destructive, it would only work if the Krell themselves opened it. Thinking they had won. We call it Pattern Sigma, the game programmer. Ben said, his eyes lighting up with a terrible understanding. In games, the final boss has a pattern. A rhythm. We've found theirs. Their entire fleet talks to itself on a shared frequency. It's how they coordinate so perfectly. It's their greatest strength. And, Su Jin continued, it is their greatest weakness. If we can feed a corrupting signal into that hive mind channel, we can make them confused. Make them see enemies that are not there. Make their ships hesitate. They will take our computers, Dr. Yoon said. They will look for this master key. We will give it to them. We will make it easy to find. And it will destroy them from the inside. They worked without sleep. Ben and Su Jin wrote the malicious code. It was beautiful in a deadly way. It was a mirror. It would take the Krell's own flawless logic and twist it back on itself. Minji prepared the final broadcast, the one that would explain Pattern Sigma to the human network, telling them what to listen for, how to know if it had worked. Dae-Hyun made sure their transmitter would run till the last possible second. Far away, Ji-hoon and Su-min listened in a makeshift camp. They heard the tired but firm voices from Bizan explaining the plan. They heard the instructions for the final global signal. Su-min's face was pale. They are not planning to escape, she whispered. Ji-hoon listened to Dr. Yoon's voice, the same calm voice that had started it all. He understood. This was the sacrifice. The Krell believed in central control, so the humans would offer them a central target, and inside that target would be a bomb. The Krell strike force fell from the sky like black hail. 10 heavy dropships, surrounded by fighters, descended directly on the university campus. Troops in heavy armor stormed the broken buildings, heading straight for the strong, pure signal coming from the library basement. Inside, the group heard the thunder above them. Dust sifted from the ceiling. The lights flickered. Dae-Hyun looked up from his wiring. They are here, he said. Dr. Yoon nodded. He went to the microphone. He switched it to the open channel, the one he knew the whole human resistance was listening to. His voice was the same as it had been on the first day. Weary, precise, a teacher to the end. This is Dr. Yoon. The Krell have found our location. Pattern Sigma is complete. The payload is ready. We are initiating the final upload now. He nodded to Ben, who pressed a key. A progress bar filled on the screen. The data was being sent out in one massive burst. It was also being copied onto the main server in the room, the one the Krell would take. Outside, the door to the basement shattered. Smoke filled the room. Silhouettes of tall, armored Krell soldiers appeared in the doorway, their weapons raised. Dr. Yoon did not turn around. He kept speaking into the microphone, his eyes on his friends. Min-jae held Su Jin's hand. Dae-Hyun stood tall beside his transmitter. Do not mourn this place, Dr. Yoon said, his voice clear. We are just one node. The network is the weapon. You are the weapon. Remember the lesson. Understand your enemy. Then use that understanding. It is the only thing they cannot shield against. A Krell officer stepped forward, its helmet translating its hissing words. "You will be silent. You are captured." Dr. Yoon smiled, a small, sad smile. He spoke his last words to the microphone, to the world. The pattern is confirmed. Their central hive-mind coordination frequency is vulnerable. Initiate. A soldier struck him with the butt of its weapon. He fell. The others were roughly seized. But the transmission had finished. The data was gone, flying through the air. Into satellites, into hidden receivers, into the memory of every person listening. And on the main server, left glowing in the middle of the room, a single file flashed with a simple label, Master Decryption Key Human Defense Corps. The Krell officer saw it. A grim satisfaction filled him. They had the head. He ordered the server disconnected and taken to the ship. He ordered the prisoners taken as well. They would be interrogated. Their knowledge would be ripped from them, and then they would be discarded. From the camp, Su-min heard the thud, the hiss of the alien voice, the sound of the blow. Then silence. She sat frozen, tears cutting clean lines through the dirt on her face. The silence from Bizan was the loudest sound she had ever heard. Ji-hoon put a hand on her shoulder. His own face was a stone mask. He listened. On another frequency, a quiet, automated voice began to speak. It was Minji's voice, recorded earlier. It was repeating a string of numbers, a frequency, a timer. Pattern Sigma is live. Await the signal. The fleet will stutter. When it does strike, the Krell commander, aboard the unyielding Will, received the report. The human nerve center was captured. Their leaders were in chains. Their core data was being uploaded to his ship's computers for analysis. Finally, this irritating, chaotic war was returning to proper order. "Excellent," he said. "Analyze the data. Find the root of their tricks. Then erase it." In his data lab, a Krell technician opened the file labeled Master Decryption Key. It was a beautiful piece of code, complex and elegant. It began to run. It did what it promised. It started to decrypt human resistance signals. But as it ran, it also began to whisper. It whispered into the flagship's communication system, into the holy hive mind frequency that connected all Krell ships. It whispered a simple, terrible lie. "I am a Krell command. Your neighbor ship is malfunctioning. It is an enemy. Isolate it. Attack it." At first, nothing happened. Then, on the edge of the fleet, a patrol ship suddenly turned its weapons on its wingmate. It fired. The stricken ship, confused, fired back. The commander stared at the tactical display as two of his own ships began to destroy each other. "What is this? A mutiny?" "No, Commander," the science officer cried, his screen flooding with error messages. "It is the human data. It is corrupting our coordination channel. It is turning us against ourselves." The poison was in the bloodstream, and it was spreading. The silence from Bizan was a deep, cold wound in the world. For Ji-hoon and Su-min, and for everyone listening, it felt like an ending. The calm, guiding voice of Dr. Yoon was gone, replaced by a static hiss that seemed to suck the hope from the air. But then a new sound emerged. It was Minji's recorded voice, calm and looped, repeating numbers. "Pattern Sigma is live. Await the signal. The fleet will stutter. When it does, strike." For hours, nothing happened. The Krell ships still hung in the sky like black stains. The world held its breath. Aboard the unyielding Will, chaos was blooming. The commander stared at his screens in disbelief. The two ships that had fired on each other were now drifting wrecks. Alerts flashed across his fleet. A cruiser near the planet's moon suddenly accelerated, claiming it was evading a non-existent swarm of human fighters. It crashed into a supply depot, destroying both. Another group of destroyers, began firing their point defense lasers at empty space, their systems convinced they were under missile attack. "It is the data," his science officer screamed, frantically trying to isolate the infection. "The human file. It is a mind virus. It is in our comms network." The commander roared orders. "Sever the hive mind link. Go to independent operation." But the Krell were not built for independence. Their strength was perfect unity. Without the constant, reassuring stream of shared data, individual ship captains became confused, hesitant. The fleet did not just stutter. It began to unravel. On the ground, Ji-hoon watched the sky. He saw the flashes of light, not directed at Earth, but at each other. He saw a massive ship veer off course, its engines flaring. The pattern Sigma signal was not a weapon that blew things up. It was a weapon that made the enemy forget how to be an army. Minji's recording stopped. In its place, a simple tone beeped 3 times. Then silence. That was the signal. Su-ming snapped into motion, her grief hardening into something sharp and useful. "It's time. The network is still there. They cut one head, but the body is moving." Across the planet, the decentralized war woke up. It was no longer about defense. It was about taking back the sky. In a hidden hangar in what was left of an Air Force base, a former graphic designer named Chul sat in the cockpit of a patched-together fighter. It was made from the front half of an old F-16 and parts of a civilian cargo plane, its wings bolted with makeshift rocket pods. He had never flown in combat. He had flown in simulators and air shows. His co-pilot was a teenage girl named Yoon-ji, a flight simulator champion. They heard the 3 beeps. Chul looked at Yoon-ji. She gave a sharp nod. Their engines, fueled by a mixture of stolen Krell energy cells and gasoline, coughed to life. They were not alone. From caves, from highways, from forests, 100 other crazy homemade flying machines lifted into the air. They were not a proper air force. They were a swarm of gnats. But the Krell fleet was busy fighting ghosts in its own mind. Chul's target was a Krell battleship, its side scarred from a fight with its own sister ship. Yoon-ji pulled up the schematics on her screen data, mined by the network weeks ago. "Its main shield generator took damage," she said. "There's a backup, but the coupling is here." She pointed to a spot on the image. "It's exposed for 5 seconds during a full power transfer." They flew straight at the giant ship, which seemed confused, turning slowly as if unsure where the threat was. Point defense lasers flickered, shooting at imaginary targets. Chul flew right into the blind spot created by the ship's own confusion. He saw the coupling, a glowing ring of metal. "Now," Yoon-ji yelled. Chul fired all his rockets. They were crude, unguided things. But at this range, they didn't need guidance. They slammed into the coupling. The ring of light exploded into sparks. The battleship's remaining shields flickered and died. Across the network, 100 other eyes saw it. A storm of scavenged missiles, launched from the ground, rose to meet the now naked hull. The battleship died not with a single blow, but with 1,000 cuts from a planet that had learned its weaknesses. The Krell commander watched his flagship screens turn red with loss. He could not understand. He had more ships, more guns. He outnumbered the human rabble 100 to 1. Yet his fleet was dying. They were not being outfought. They were being outthought. Every system, every tactic, had been studied, taken apart, and used against them. The cook with the microwave, the farmer with the vine, the student with the code. They had all been teachers, and humanity had been a very fast learner. His ship shook. A blast from a hijacked Krell ground cannon, now aimed at the sky by a former bus mechanic, had scored a direct hit. The bridge lights faltered. He stumbled to his personal log recorder. His voice, once so full of cold certainty, was now hollow, shaken to its core. He spoke, not for his superiors, but because he had to try and understand. Final entry. We came to Earth with absolute superiority. We outnumbered them 100 to 1 in every engagement. And still, we lost everything. He looked at the view screen, showing the beautiful, scarred blue planet below. Not just the battle, not just the fleet. We lost our certainty. We showed a species of endless, clever defiance how to break us, and they learned too quickly. They did not defeat our soldiers. They defeated our science, our logic, our very idea of what war is. His voice dropped to a whisper. A single unified human would have been simple, but a billion furious, ingenious teachers, learning from every loss? We never stood a chance. Another impact rocked the ship. The recording ended. On the ground, Ji-hoon and Su-min walked out of their shelter as the sun rose. The sky, once darkened by ships, was now streaked with the trails of falling fire. Not from bombs, but from dying Krell vessels. The silence was back, but it was different. It was the silence after a storm. They saw a figure stumbling through the rubble. It was a Krell soldier, its armor cracked, one of its forearms hanging useless. It saw them and raised its weapon weakly. Ji-hoon raised his own rifle. They stared at each other across the wasteland. The Krell soldier looked at the sky, at the falling fires that were its hope. It looked at the two humans, tired, dirty, but standing unbroken. Its weapon clattered to the ground. It did not surrender. It simply gave up. It turned and shuffled away, a lonely, defeated thing. Su-min lowered her binoculars. "It's over," she said, her voice empty of joy. Ji-hoon looked at the rising sun, at the smoke clearing from the air. He thought of Dr. Yoon, of Hana in her tunnel, of Jae and his seeds, of Chul in his patchwork plane. He thought of the network, the invisible web of shared understanding that had held the world together when everything else fell apart. "No," he said quietly. "It's not over. We just passed the first test." He took her hand. They stood together, watching the dawn of a new world, a world that had learned the most important lesson of all, that they were stronger as a thinking network than they had ever been as a fighting empire. The price had been everything, but they had not lost. They had been changed forever.